Thank you for joining us for Talks with Tyler ISD for this episode. Joining us today is Dr. Marty Crawford, Superintendent of Schools for Tyler ISD, and we appreciate you joining us today. One cool thing that a lot of people probably don't realize about you is that you are actually in the Athletic Hall of Fame at Baylor University.
Yeah, a long time ago, over 25 years ago, I guess I could hit a baseball a little bit, and had a successful run down there as a student athlete. Most importantly, probably for my parents, I got my school paid for at a place that's pretty expensive, and I was successful as a student athlete down there, and they rewarded me, in 2008, I believe, with induction in the Hall of Fame down there at Baylor. And very loyal to Baylor University and the things that they stand for. I think people get a little tired of it at times, but
big Baylor fan.
Yeah, big Baylor fan. But very, very proud of that school and what it's become, and hopefully I was a little part of it. And so certainly something I'm very proud of. But that's not what just makes me. It certainly was an opportunity to go down there and get my school paid for, like I said, but at the same time, play the game that I love, which is a very difficult game, and teaches you a lot about life lessons. Because in baseball, you're considered successful by how well you deal with failure, and if you're failing 70% of the time in the game of baseball and you're considered successful, that's a pretty tough thing to swallow. Yeah. And so being able to do that and then listen to people in the stands, rip on you a little bit, say some things about your family or you personally. I do think that you see a lot of people that maybe played the game of baseball that turn into good leaders because you're able to filter out some of the noise so you can focus and concentrate so that you can be successful there. And that translates on later on in life when you can't necessarily run down to first base as well as you could then, and maybe you don't have the athletic abilities that you had or the skills that you had. It kind of translates into things in life, to building grit and resiliency, because you have to deal with so much of a challenge at times, especially when things aren't going well.
Right. Well, and so your past in baseball, you've kind of used some of those skills that you learned, and how has that shaped your leadership style?
Well, it's certainly things have evolved over the last 25 years in school leadership, which is the profession that I chose. One thing that school leaders 25 years ago didn't have to hear about is social media. I mean, it took time for someone to sit down and write a letter, or sit down and somebody pick up the phone. And so in saying that, I equate to, in today's climate, whether it be school related or political, and listening to people and trying to hear what they're saying and not how they're saying it. And I think that's something that you're able to do, that my baseball experiences allow me to do. Because when you have 8,000 Aggies or 8,000 Longhorns or 6,000 Red Raiders, or even if you go down to LSU screaming and hollering at you, you kind of got to put that aside and do what you can to make that successful. So that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. People are not pleased for a lot of reasons, and I think a lot of their angst and their ire go in one direction. And when you're the largest taxing entity in an area, you're a pretty big target. So you've got to listen to what they say, but at the same time, do what you can to make sure that we're successful. Very, very, very equitable in regard to my experiences as a baseball player.
Yeah, well, speaking of where we are now, let's kind of go back a little bit. We had to make a big decision as a district, and you especially coming off of spring break, to kind of wait a week and see what was happening with COVID-19. That's kind of when we started to hear a bunch of things. Yeah. And then, of course, as we know, after that, the governor of Texas shut down all school systems across the state. Kind of tell us a little bit more about what was going through your mind at the time, and then how you decided to look at the long game at that point.
Yeah, the reason that we shut down was to give our hospitals a break. We really thought that this virus was going to overrun and overwhelm our hospitals, and thankfully, that didn't happen, and it still hadn't happened. And so we're slowly opening back up. But reflecting back to last March, I'd just gone to Major League Baseball spring training with my son, and got the news that, back into spring break, that this was a possibility. And we brought in top level administrators and leadership to kind of plan what that was going to look like. We made the decision to cancel, or at least postpone coming back to school by a week, which I think was a smart decision, because sure enough, the governor did on the back end of that go ahead and cancel all school operations for the foreseeable future. And then all of a sudden it became long-term throughout the spring. And so, certainly we wanted to make sure we were trying to provide some type of educational opportunity for students at home. We wanted to make sure that their nutritional needs were still being met in the short term, which actually turned into a long-term thing. And then thinking that because of the reason that the shutdown occurred was to make sure we didn't overwhelm the hospitals, that we were going to lessen the curve over the span of a month or two and be able to get kids back in school, at least for the last month of the season. May 4th was kind of our return date, which never happened. And that was such a disappointment. So it came from a short-term issue to more of a long-term issue. And then after we knew that we weren't going to come back May 4th, it was, what's the next thing that we can do to make this year memorable, at least for the students that were graduating? And that was to make sure we had graduation at Christus Trinity Mother Frances Rose Stadium. And we did, I think, a fabulous job. Our folks did a fabulous job of being able to pull that off and make sure that we had graduation for that senior class of 2020. Which was very special, and a very disappointing time that we weren't able to get the kids back to enjoy their senior years and all the things that go along with it, with proms and other types of banquets and other types of celebrations. So in a very short answer, short-term version of that, it was about getting that class of 2020 graduated once we saw that we weren't going to be able to come back to school K through 12.
It also allowed them a little bit of closure to their senior year as well. So it was great. And we held 4 graduations successfully. So that was a great thing that we were able to do it a little bit later than we would have liked, but we were still able to hold it. Well, now transitioning into the summer months, we had to go into that thinking we may not come back in the fall. What is that going to look like? And I know that the district did a lot of things in terms of technology and preparing the teachers, learning management systems. Tell us a little bit more about all those working parts. I mean, this was a big undertaking.
Yeah, it really was. And, if you think back to March, while we were planning on the seniors getting graduated, school administration, at least district level, central office administration, was planning for what this looks like in the fall. So it wasn't like we just threw this together. We started building the structure way back in April, I believe, and understanding that our principals, while they were deemed essential, were kind of having to manage their campuses as effectively as they can during the last part of the semester. And then it was up to us to start planning for what it was going to look like in the fall, and then bring the principals in early summer in June and start getting their feedback, because they are the direct link to the campus. They're the ones that get the feedback from their staff, from their teachers, and bring it back to us. Certainly we would love to get input from all 1,900 of our teachers, sit down with them, get some authentic feedback, not just a survey, a Likert survey, to where they might be having a bad day that day and answer it in a certain way. But the principals know their campuses. And engaging them in June to develop what we came up with so we could start school on August 19th was something that was imperative over the summer months, especially as soon as July 4th was over with, when the new contract days start for us. And the principals did an admirable job. They were adamant in some things about what their teachers were going to need, what they were going to need to be able to be successful. But when it boils down to it, what's best for students has always been at the forefront. And even in times of this health crisis and political debates that are going on, we've got to understand what's going to be successful to get started this year, so that we can start thinking about the long game.
And as we looked towards that start of school, that first day of school start date, a lot of districts around the state started moving it, whether it was moving it up or moving it back. The board decided to keep it where it was.
Aren't you glad they did that?
Yes.
Some of our peers just recently went back to in-person school and started about the same time we did. Yeah, they might have maneuvered a little bit around Labor Day, which was only a week and a half or 2 weeks after we started, or they actually started earlier. And I think that our board holding firm on the actual start date allowed us to go ahead and prepare for some type of normalcy as far as the calendar goes. We knew that 65% of our kids were probably going to be at school. The other 35% were going to actually start at home. But at the same time, not manipulating that calendar, going to an intersessional calendar, which is a year-round school. I think what you do is you build the calendar and then make adjustments as you go. It's in our district policy for that to happen, and our board's very amenable to that if we ever need it. But to actually go and blow up your calendar without knowing what's going to happen in the future, it was something I think our board did very well with. Plus, they looked at data. I mean, we've all looked at health data as we've gone about this and what populations that this does affect. Do our protocols match what the CDC has said? Do we think that that's a reasonable way to operate a school? And so, yes, when the decision was made, this is our plan, this is our standard. I think our board has said, okay, let's try this. Let's go ahead and go with the normal calendar. Let's build in some emergency days on the back end, just kind of backload those. And that's kind of where we're at. And can you believe we're almost in November? I never would have thought we would have been talking about November and Thanksgiving. December's a month away almost, and then Christmas break. I'd never thought that back in June. It just seemed so far out. And then here we are with a fairly successful start.
And we had a successful start due to the return to learn plan. Lots of protocols were put into place. We already had a very good system in terms of cleaning and health safety, but we really did examine that closely when it came to that.
Sure, and very concerned about our teachers because they're the ones that are in the classroom with our kids. Kids, as far as their health goes, they're very resilient. And at least this virus right here is something that just doesn't seem like it's affecting the younger population. We want to make sure we protected the older population that we have, whether it be at home for their parents or guardians, or even our teachers in our classrooms. And one thing that was adamant from our principals they said that we had to have for our teachers, which is a very politically charged issue, is the face coverings. And so we took the politics out of it, and we said that a barrier between my respiratory system and yours, and another barrier, if you're wearing one as well, is reasonable and has some logic to it. It certainly gives us confidence that we can come back into school. Talk about the social distancing, the hygienic practices, and then all the cleaning that we do, along with some operational manipulation to where we're not on top of each other all the time. Those are some reasonable strategies that we put in place that were part of the return to learn, combined with our virtual learning for those that weren't comfortable starting right away. They gave us some time, bought us some time to build the case that we haven't even had above 1% of an infection rate of COVID in our school system. And we've pretty much remained had fidelity with that. That and quarantine, and that's a very uncomfortable and frustrating thing, but our contact tracing to actually quarantine kids that might have been exposed to it, or staff, I think has also been a reasonable strategy, an uncomfortable, frustrating strategy at times, but that's helped us continue to have school operations and to keep people safe and to not spread the virus like folks think that you would in a confined space. So very successful start of the school year, thanks to the planning of the return to learn plan and getting the feedback, from staff through the principals back up to us. I think was a very smart strategy for a large organization like ourselves, where we have 2,700 employees, 18,000 students, and two parents per kid there. You're talking about a circle, and spouses. You're talking about a circle of about 60,000 people to see that our COVID rates and what they are certainly have been successful so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that probably people don't realize is that when you look at the numbers that that health puts out for the community, that's completely separate from what's actually happening on our campuses. That might be one of the misconceptions out there. We've never gone above 1%, whereas they show a much higher percentage for community. Those are two totally separate numbers, and they need to be considered. What other misconceptions do you think might be out there surrounding this situation that we are in right now?
Well, misconceptions, I do think, exist out there, and with social media. I've said this time and time again, we don't run our district off of Facebook. I don't even give it the true name. Because, thank God for our First Amendment rights. We can say anything we want to and project that. I can too. So we're not going to run our school system off of that. But at the same time, we've got to be very smart about what we're doing. We started very tight. We can loosen up, and we can always contract again. Excuse me. And that's something that we're very aware and cognizant of, and we'll continue to watch the data, especially internally, because so many people, whether it be students or parents or staff, have told us that anecdotally that, this is going crazy through my church right now, or this is going crazy through my husband or my wife's work right now. Or, we went to a social gathering, whether it be a birthday party or a quinceañera or something like that. And there were some folks that got infected there that aren't even associated with the schools. So in saying that, I think we have to be reasonable that the virus is with us. We've said this time and time again, school systems have had 100 years of success of managing illness outbreaks. By no means am I comparing this with a flu outbreak or a cold or any type of the norovirus that's so contagious. There's no doubt that this is a little different than that. But as far as the health management of it, schools have had very good success over the last 100 years in trying to manage this while continuing to educate kids. And I think some of the misconceptions out there, or maybe some of the things that people aren't realizing, is that this is a long-term impactful thing that we're having to deal with. That the shutdown, if you extend it over than what we had, you're talking about some educational crisis that's going to evolve, some nutritional crisis that's going to evolve, and eventually an economic crisis. And we're talking about the quality of life for these children who have 70 to 80 years left in their lives. This could impact them the longer we stay constrained. It could affect them long term.
Well, and speaking of that, the district recently made the decision, now that we are into the school year, second 6 weeks, well into that, to bring all of the Learn at Home students back. Obviously, that was not a decision that was made lightly, and there were several factors, some of which you just mentioned, that played into that.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about what went into that decision.
First grading period data came back to us, and it was very concerning. 60% of our students that were learning at home were not being successful, almost threefold almost compared to what was not being successful in school. And so that was alarming and threw up a red alert right away. But then you start thinking about the social emotional toll that's taking. You start thinking about the toll that the nutritional depreciation that we've had is taking as well, to where we normally serve 11,000 meals per day. We were short 4,000 meals per day, so we were only serving 7,000. Understand that 75% of our students are economically disadvantaged. It just wasn't taking care of itself. Even though we were offering curbside pickups at all of our campuses, unlike what we did in the summer where we just did hubs, we had better participation in the summer when all of our students were away as opposed to now. So that was something that was extremely concerning about that. But I think what's been that hasn't been reported was the inching up of the kids coming back to school even before the first grading period was over with, to the point to where when we made the announcement, we're about at 85% at school learners, 15% at home. So you talk about that's about 2,500 students that are at home, spread out amongst 30 campuses or so. It's almost negligible on how many kids you're bringing back per classroom.
Right.
It's around 3 kids per classroom. Maybe even in the elementary school, it's actually a little bit right at 2 or maybe even under per classroom. So a lot of it is influenced by where we're getting our news from. Some of the things in the blogs and discussion groups, either on social media or whatever, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So when you look at the data about what the illness is doing and how effective the school system has managed it versus the success rate of very fragile population in returns to economic status and educational status as far as attainment goes. You kind of had to make the decision, a leadership command decision, to bring those students back because of the effectiveness of in-class learning. With the understanding that if you have a medical attestation, either you're medically fragile as a student, or you have those in your household that can't afford to maybe have this brought back in your household, there are ways for you to stay virtually. But at the same time, those that were taking advantage of the system, maybe their parents at home didn't have the capacity to be able to manage the at-home learning for whatever reason. I'm not being critical of that.
Right.
We needed to step in and do what we're trained to do, and that is to teach kids, to provide them academic opportunities so that they can be successful, eventually graduate, and become productive citizens in our society. And I'll just go back to this, Jennifer. If we would have just continued on this road to where we didn't bring our students back, going back to last March, you're looking at almost an 18-month gap to where students were not in class. I know a lot of folks like to be critical of the virtual learning program, but if we start thinking about third graders and fourth graders, that's very difficult, because even college students that are now learning virtually right now, their success rate virtually is not very high either. And those are young adults who can effectively be disciplined enough to manage their at-home learning. Third and fourth graders, and even high school freshmen, they don't have the discipline yet. And parents, it's very difficult for them to manage that at home as well. So we need to do what we're supposed to do as far as our community goes, and that's why the command decision was made to come back.
Yeah, there definitely is something to be said for that face-to-face instruction in a classroom. And like you just said, Learn at Home is not going away. It will be there for those that have the medical attestation. Then, of course, you also have the situation of where we may have to have some quarantine as we continue to fight this and keep our rates low in schools. And so that will still be available for them as well. So they continue their education, which is very important.
Absolutely. And our teachers, as compared to 2 months ago when we started this, are more comfortable. Every teacher, for the most part, has a device that the board approved, an iPad, so that they actually have a device. They're not using their own devices. I know that that's been out there, but they're actually using district-approved devices at the campuses, the top-of-the-line technology, to be able to do what they need to do to provide the instruction virtually to our students who are still at home, whether they might have gotten sick, placed on quarantine, or they have that medical attestation to stay at home. So we're still going to offer that program. Again, we've just got to have those three things happen. You've either been quarantined, you actually have the virus, and we're wanting to make sure that we keep you on track, but you're healthy and not spreading it to others, or you have the attestation because you have some type of medical issue existing, whether with the student or at home with the parent or guardian. We're going to continue to do that. We're just going to try to get everybody back that we can so that we can be successful, because we still have accountability to think about, which is extremely important to our community. We've heard about that. We've had major success over the last 6 years in eradicating low-performing schools in traditionally underserved parts of our community. Very proud of that. And we just don't want that gap to widen, and we certainly don't want to go backwards with the gains that we've had. But more importantly, it's about graduation. And you've got end-of-course exams that are coming up. We don't want our dropouts to increase, and because it's not going to be good for our community. When you start talking about gainful employment, you've got to have that high school diploma at the very minimum, if not on your way to an industry certification or a college and career opportunity like going to college. We're going to get behind if we spend the next 18 months in this shutdown.
Yeah, and while we are trying to get everybody back, we're also prepared should something happen. We do have that BLADE program that will allow us to move in between the two instructional models.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that you think about. Anytime you go into a crisis, you've got to be better on the back end of it than when you went into it. And our instructional technology for these native, digital natives, our students, we were pretty archaic and very average. And I think now that we've once the Chromebooks finally get here and they get released out of the Pacific Ocean or wherever it's going on, all caught up in that geopolitical issue that we've had going on since the virus started. When we can put a digital device in front of every student, whether you're in school or at home, you're going to meet their needs. Every student that I've seen, the little guys, pretty much know what a smartphone looks like, how to manipulate that even better than I do. The same thing with an iPad or a Chromebook as well. So that's really what's going to be invaluable as we come out of the back of this, when we don't have to use this as an excuse because of COVID or because of an illness. We're actually going to be able to put a device in everybody's hands. And back in 2013, that was a big part of our strategic plan. And we're able to check that box now. Yeah, it was in response to this the shutdown that we have, but I think that you can say that we're going to be better on the back end of this thing than where we were going in, especially for our students.
Yeah, it's really meeting the futuristic needs of our students, looking forward and really looking forward to getting them back on track. Because again, we're always looking 10 steps ahead of where we're currently at. Tell us a little bit about that, because everything that you just explained, I hope the community realizes, and we're all going to have to come together on this, is that we're going to have a lot of ground to cover. We do have students that have been out since March and really have done nothing academically, not even until now.
Yeah, and to have true partnerships, school parent partnerships, school community partnerships, we do need everybody rowing in the same direction, and we can't put our palms up and say that's not us. What we need is our community and our parents and our guardians, that when the school system offers opportunities like Saturday schools, Rose City summer camps, to where we have a lot of literacy and numeracy enrichment going on so we can attack the summer slide, we need to get our kids into those programs. And our teachers and our middle management administrators do a heck of a job of designing these programs. We just need our community to get our kids to those programs and get the right kids to those programs, the ones that really struggle when you have these type of shutdowns, the ones that normally struggle with the summer slide because they take 2.5 months off of any type of stimulating academic enrichment. We're offering those types of things, whether it be in the summer or even on Saturdays or after school programs. We need our parents, we need our community to engage in that. And then we also need our community to engage us in academic-based involvement. Thank you, community, for doing things like landscaping, for providing meals to our teachers, and it's very inspirational. But we have a lot of educated folks in our community. We have a lot of people that have a heart for giving, and we need mentors. No doubt about it. Communicate with the Mentoring Alliance. That would be somebody to reach out to. Our own school system can get you when it's time to start bringing volunteers back into our campuses. We would love to pair you with a child to provide that mentor so that you can read with them. We'll get you trained on the phonics initiatives that we have going on right now, and what you can do as a mentor or even as a parent to provide some of that extra time, which is so invaluable for our students to catch up. It's going to take time, but we need the students engaged and at our campuses whenever we offer those.
Yeah, and it really is going to take the whole community coming together to kind of help to close this gap for all of our students.
Sure.
Well, we're going to switch gears a little bit now, not talking about schools as much, but you've got a big change coming your way in your life, and it has to do with family.
Yeah.
So congratulations, you're about to become a grandpa.
Yeah.
So have you thought of what you're going to be called or what you want your grandpa name to be?
Yeah, Ashton and Cole, they're about a year ahead of schedule on that, so it was kind of a surprise. So proud of both of them, and Ashton, my daughter, oldest daughter, and she's wrapping up graduate school. This time next year she'll have a dual master's in nursing and an MBA. So we were hoping that they would maybe wait until that happened, but in typical Crawford fashion, they're just taking it all on at one time. So yeah, we're excited about that, and my wife and I are looking at names, and Elena is my wife, so we're thinking possibly Lena for her, just to shorten it down. It's a cute little grandmotherly name that's not grandmotherly,
right?
And grandfatherly is not my style, at least not right now. So we're thinking Crawdaddy.
I like that.
Which kind of goes back to my baseball playing days. That was my nickname, among others, that they called me. So got approval from Ashton and Cole that Crawdaddy might be the official name. Who knows what's going to come out of that little guy?
What
little
abbreviation it will turn into
But
with the first grandbaby.
Yeah, so we're excited about it. It is kind of shocking, but whenever you have your first child at age 22, you run the risk of being a 47-year-old grandfather, right. which is crazy. But at the same time, I'm young enough to enjoy them and get that dose of excitement that comes with being a grandparent. I keep hearing from those of my friends that are already grandparents that, man, it's going to be awesome. You're going to love it. And I think it is because you start to kind of maybe relive some of those early childhood memories that you have that are so fond of your own children through those grandkids. So we're excited about it. Yeah, Lena and Crawdaddy, I think, are going to be our names, and we'll see where it goes from here.
Well, congratulations to Ashton and Cole, to you and Elena as well. And thank you so much for joining us today, for your leadership and leading Tyler ISD through this crazy COVID time. We still have a lot to go, and just appreciate that from you.
Well, Jennifer, as you know, we've got great people, and I just happen to sit at the top of the org chart. And we love Tyler, Texas, love East Texas. I always like to remind people that I was raised down here, and not in Tyler, but in Lindale and Carthage. But so I was close. And so this is really home. And the people here are just great people. We're very proud to be able to serve them as superintendent and actually have my own children come through this school system as well. So any decision that we do make, if it's good for the Crawford kid, it's good for all kids. And certainly we couldn't do it without great people. We have great principals. We have great staff, all the way from the transportation department to the maintenance department to the custodial department to the food service department. But when it boils down to it, we've got great teachers. And I'm so proud of our teachers who were very nervous to come back and remain nervous. And guess what? We're nervous with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly you can make command decisions and have that leadership mantra about yourself. But at the same time, it boils down to it. I stay up at night worrying about our teachers because they're the ones that are doing the work, and we're so proud of them right now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for joining us.
Sure.
And thank you all for joining us for this episode of Talks with Tyler ISD. We'll see you next time.